Hello, and welcome to the Embrace Balance, Discover Joy podcast. I'm Amanda Butland, your host and intuitive life coach.
All right. Well, welcome to another episode of the Embrace Balance Discover Joy podcast. Today, my special guest is Dr. Glenn Berger, a psychotherapist and coach. Glenn, it's so great to have you with me today. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a delight to be here with you.
Awesome. Well, let's start with my little icebreaker question that I like to ask all of my guests before we dive in. Would you mind sharing with us what activity or hobby brings you the most joy and why?
Oh man, I love so many different things. I love writing. I guess that would be a hobby. And I love music. I come from a musical background, so I love playing the piano. And probably my greatest hobby though is hanging out with my wife.
Oh, that's lovely. I love that so much. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
All right, so we're just going to go ahead and dive right in.
All right.
I want to talk about sort of what it is that you do first, and then maybe we'll sort of talk about how you got there. But as a psychotherapist and coach, I know you have a program, the self-cultivation course,
Yes.
and I would love to learn a little bit more. Maybe if you could share what that is with us.
Yeah. So I've been a psychotherapist for about 30 years now, and I'm always looking for better methods to help people. And for some people, talk therapy is exactly what they need and just enough. Some people use therapy. I call it sort of like emotional massage. They come in, they like to talk for most of the session. Maybe I say one or two sentences. It makes them feel a little bit better, but they don't really change. And they come in and they kind of complain about the same things over and over
Mm,
again. So I realize that for many people, talking is not enough. And so I wanted to come up with a system where they could learn, because I think that's a very important part of our transformational process, and they could actually practice doing something different in their life. So I created the Heart Finders course, which it's an online course. It includes about 25 videos where you can learn everything you could possibly learn about human nature based on ancient wisdom to modern neuroscience, and where I provide about 60 exercises that people can actually do to become more courageous, to change their bad habits into good ones, to find self-love instead of self-hatred, to gain in wisdom so they can make better decisions in their life, find more self-love. And there's also a community aspect of it as well. I run a group and there's a community platform on the course where people can interact. And I think that that's such an important component of being able to transform these days. So that's the basic idea of what the course is.
yeah. I love that. I love the community aspect because I think you're right. I think, if people are, along this journey and they have other people that are sort of going along that same journey, they have that sense of community. And, especially when, they are starting to notice changes and just being able to share those sort of successes with other people. It's really, really great to have that level of support where it's not just you sort of in this vacuum, I'm doing it by myself and without that community. So I love that component that you have included with the course.
Yeah, we're kind of in a loneliness epidemic right now,
Mm,
especially with everybody just being on their phones. We know that this is very true for a lot of men. And there was a short time when I worked at the Westchester County Jail, and I formed some really beautiful relationships with some of the inmates there. Most of them were there because of drug charges,
mm,
or maybe they had some mental illness issues as well. And they would come into it was, horrible environment, but we would do our therapeutic work there. And each guy would come in and they would expose and express their pain to me. They were in so much pain, so much
mm.
suffering. And then the next guy would come in and say the same thing, right? And so I would say to them, do you ever talk to each other about this? Oh, no, you
Uh,
never do that. You never reveal your
mm,
vulnerability. And that was in a jail setting, but I think it's
right.
common to our culture. So I
Mm.
hear the same things from the men that I work with or the people that I work with, and I say, "Do you ever talk to anybody else about this?" No, I think a part of our suffering is feeling like we're the only ones that are suffering in that way. When you find out that other people are struggling with similar issues, it really makes things a lot
Mm.
better.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I also wanted to go back to what you said around, being a therapist and sort of hearing people just talk, right, and
Yeah,
complain about the same thing all the time, and that you created this so that they can move beyond that, out of that sort of stuckness, and actually do something and move forward and sort of overcome or resolve or whatever it is, from what it is that they're complaining about.
yeah,
So I love that you do sort of both sides, like the therapy and then the coaching, because I
yeah.
think oftentimes they do really, really work well together. And I'm curious, how did that come about? Right, from just listening to people complain to actually wanting to help them get out of that and add the coaching component.
Yeah. So, I when I got was pursuing my PhD, I thought that I would find the psychological theory of everything. I knew it was a bit audacious to claim such a thing, and that I knew I wouldn't actually do it, but why not aim high, right? So along the way, I found the philosophy of a Chinese sage named Mencius, who lived 2,500 years ago and was considered to be the wisest sage who ever lived. And one of the things that Mencius said was, pity the man who has lost his path and does not follow it, and has lost his heart and does not go out and recover it. When people's dogs and chicks are lost, they go out and look for them. But when people's hearts or original nature are lost, they do not go out and look for them. The principle of self-cultivation consists in nothing but trying to find the lost heart. So this resonated for me very deeply. And anytime I say it to people, they kind of get the metaphor of the heart, and it means something to them. And though this resonated so deeply, it asked more questions than it answered, which is, what is the heart? What does it look like to have a lost heart? How do we lose the heart? And most importantly, how do you find the heart again? And he tells us that the way to find the heart is to self-cultivate. And so I did a very deep dive into what that means, what that process of self-cultivation is. And it means you actually have to do something. It's a process. It's a lifelong process. And so that's where I recognized that I had to come up with something that people could actually do, a process of self-cultivation, and define that for people to really become their best self.
Mhm.
Sometimes I think that my agenda for people is different than their agenda for themselves, because they can't even conceptualize how good their lives can actually be. They might not even recognize how deep their suffering is,
Mm.
and what is truly possible for them. I think that that's a part psychologically of what the problem is their limited imagination of what could be for them. So I wanted to give people not only that vision of what could be possible, but a way to get there.
Wow, I love that. That's very powerful, right? What you just said around people not even knowing or being able to see what's possible, and that you're able to enlighten them into seeing what is possible and actually helping them get there. How amazing! Um, it must it must be to be able to watch that transformation. And I'm curious because I know it is really hard for people to see that sometimes. So how is it that you're able to um, show that to them where they can actually see it and believe it for themselves?
Yeah, yeah. There's another phrase that Mencius said, which is that you cannot pull the shoots. In other words, when you plant something and the shoots come out of the ground, you can't yank it to make it grow faster than its normal organic rate, right? So people grow at their own rate, and part of this process is being patient with that slow rate of growth. But it happens if you stick with it over time. So for example, we might there's an exercise of naming your values, your top five values. And when you ask that kind of question, or to evaluate and get a baseline for where your life is, because that's kind of how the program starts, it's really amazing to watch how it changes how people think. They're starting to think in different language. They're starting to express themselves in a different kind of way when they're tapping into what is really important to me. What are my values? What's the distance between where my life is and what's really important to me? And it's really interesting to just we sort of have these tapes that play over and over again. So if somebody just comes in and they start telling their story, or they're in their persona, or they're in their negative self-beliefs, it's very habituated and automatic and almost
Mm,
unconscious, right? When you invite them to shift that perspective by inviting them to contemplate something other than what they normally run through, it starts to bring up other parts of themselves. It starts to reveal other parts of themselves, and then they get a glimpse of what might be possible.
mm. Yeah, beautiful. I love what you said around just I helping them identify values as sort of like the first step, because I think oftentimes people aren't necessarily aware. Like they might have a general understanding, like I know that this is important, but really getting a sense and like sort of digging deep and like figuring out what those values are, those sort of like underlying core values that people have. And I'm curious if you have a specific process to help people sort of identify those values, because I know there's so many ways to do that, but you said top five. And so I'm curious if there's a specific way and how you help people sort of identify what their values are.
You can I provide a list in the
Mm,
exercise and choose, but also to dig deep within themselves and to uh and again to share those things with other folks.
mm,
So that way they're also hearing what's important to other people, and that informs a process. Uh uh, I think it was William Faulkner or some writer who said, "How do I know what I think until I read what I wrote?"
mm,
Right? So there's a process in the process of, as you do something, maybe you say it and then maybe you go back and then you say, no, that's not exactly the most important thing to me,
mm,
or that's not what I really meant. And it's in that process that what's important to us in this sense can really emerge. And another part of the exercise is there's a way that we kind of shape a statement that is an action guide. So here's who I am, here's what's important to me, here's the kind of person I want to be. And then when you're in a choice point of, do I do that cocaine? Do I smoke that weed? Do I sit on my couch? Or do I uh, go out and volunteer to help some folks get a meal? And is this going to move me towards becoming the
mm,
person that I know that I want to be, or is this going to move me away from that? So I think
mm.
to really articulate that in that moment, because we get very caught up in the gratification of the moment, right? Like the
Sure.
impulse of the moment. But to actually have something that you can look at and say, wait, is this going to move me in this direction or in that direction, can help people
Mm,
make better choices in the moment. It's not
yeah,
easy, and it doesn't always work,
sure.
but at least they know when it's not working.
Yeah, yeah, sometimes those habits run deep. I
Yeah,
did want to actually talk about what you mentioned a little bit around, when people are working to identify those values, and sometimes they change because as you dig a little bit deeper, it's like, well, maybe this isn't something that I value, but it's something that I thought I should value.
yeah,
I want to talk a little bit about that because I know sometimes people think that their values are their values, but after digging a little bit deeper, it's like, well, maybe that actually isn't my value, but it's a value that
yeah,
somebody's pushed onto me. So I'd love
right.
to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I work with a guy who, and this is not uncommon. He works at one of the top private equity firms in New York. Uh, and I actually, because I do this work remotely, see him in his office, and he's wearing his beautiful clothing, and he's always followed the path. He went to the right school, he got the right job, he makes a lot of money, he lives in the right apartment, he has the right wife. He's kind of got all of that stuff going on, but it's very much not who he authentically is.
Mm,
And he doesn't know who he authentically is. He just knows that this does not really um, express his essential being, that thing that Mencius talked about, which is people go out and look for their dogs and chicks, but they don't look for their original nature,
mm,
because you can get so caught. And he's very, because he's actually so deeply insecure, he likes to say that, oh, I work for, and he names the company, and people are very impressed, right, in our culture. But as we've done our work, he recognizes that the values that led him to that kind of position of you know, you work at that kind of place, and you make that kind of money are not really the most important things
Mm.
to him. That's the danger of therapy. So, so you might figure something like that out. Oh, oh, that's why I drink so much. Oh, that's why I'm so unhappy. Oh, okay, that's why I had that affair, you know. Yeah, right, because you haven't really been listening to your heart.
Yeah. Wow. And so I guess, once people realize that, um, that can be sort of a difficult journey then, right? To sort of like realize that sort of the life that they've built isn't true to their authentic selves, that, they're on this path of, uncovering and finding their heart. And so what's the next step for somebody like that?
Yeah, that's so again, I think that what we said before is really important, which is finding a community of
Mm,
like-minded people. So I work with
hmm
a number of people who are in recovery of one kind or another. And yeah, it's really difficult for them to, one of the things that makes it so difficult to get clean and sober is that the social world that we live in,
mm,
everybody's drinking to excess, right? So what am I going to do? Who are my friends going to be if I'm not doing that?
mm,
So if they go into, if they're in my group, or dealing with my community, or they're in a 12-step program, and they all fit together, now they're finding a community of
mm,
different people that they can actually have better relationships with, right? It can, and I don't deny to them as they're contemplating this that it can lead to significant loss
mm,
in terms of relationships, and that working out. I work with one guy who sort of entered a world a couple of years ago with the woman that he's with now, who their whole social world was around drinking.
mm,
And so he hadn't been drinking for a long time, but then when he got together with her, if he couldn't beat him, he joined him, and he
mm,
ended up cracking his head open and almost dying, and now he's sober again. But it's really now work for the two of them to establish a
mm,
relationship on a different basis. And they're doing it, and which is great and it's beautiful, but you have to have the courage to hold on to what's really important to you in the
mm.
face of the potential of losing relationships. It does happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I like how you sort of brought that back to sort of the how important that community aspect is, especially as you're doing this work.
Oh yeah.
Because, right, because it's so easy to fall back into old patterns, bad habits.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I love that. And thank you for sharing that story because I think it really brings it sort of home to like how does this work conceptually versus like what is it actually like in a real life with
Yeah.
somebody who is managing all like life.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. We in our group on Saturday, which is a men's group, and we have people whose ages range from 21 to 60 something, and it's a beautiful group of guys, and the kid who's in school, and he's screwing up, and he's getting high every day, and he's not leaving his room, and he's not doing his homework. So we just all turned on our microphones at the same time and yelled at him, and he just loved that. It's like, come on, let's go, like get it together. Like we've all done it. It's time to stop screwing around. And he's like, he just loved getting all that attention, all that love.
That's great. That's interesting, like even though it might be, I mean, I guess it's positive attention, but just
Right. I mean, we have a deep relationship already. It's
sure,
not,
sure.
it's based on the relationship that you have. Nobody was shaming him. It was, we know you can do it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's very
No,
encouraging.
that's it's great. It's really, really, really great to have that level of support, I think, when anybody's doing this sort of work. So I just think that, I understand how important that is. So I love that you sort of built that in
Yeah,
to the program so that people have that
yeah,
space that really like it really is just a safe space, right? Where people can just do and fail, but have the support.
exactly.
Because it's so rare to have a space that's so safe for
Right.
just like anybody in general, right?
So true. So true. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where
Yes.
men are not talking about sports or
Mm.
whatever the, very shallow things are that men talk about.
And I'm actually, and maybe not surprised is not the right word, but maybe that that you have men that are so open to having the discussions in the space because I know, like you just said, it's hard for men to sort of open up, and share these things because they're so used to being, I guess it's like a cultural thing, like men don't share emotions and things like
Right.
that, and so that how you've actually created this space so that men feel safe to talk about these topics.
I would say that it probably took about a year and a half. When I talk about don't pull the shoots, that for in the beginning there was, and there's still some levels of caution that I'm continuously encouraging the men to break through, to use this as somebody was saying to me recently that there's research that shows that men bond by doing hard things together, that there's a brain chemical called vasopressin that gets secreted when men do hard things together, and it creates a bond, right? So now we're not going out there and fighting a war or something like that. So that's not the level of it. But I encourage the men to uh, be courageous and do the hard thing by saying the hard thing, by
Mm,
revealing parts of themselves that they don't want to reveal. And there was one guy who he does amazing work in a nonprofit way, and he kind of always comes in and he's sort of the guy who's got it all together as compared to everybody else. And then he mentioned a relationship, and I just asked him, you never talk about your relationship. And then he just went into how difficult this relationship is, which he's hasn't talked about in 2 years, right? He finally did it,
mm,
right? And it was actually so healing for the rest of the group to realize that this person actually has struggles as well. We don't
mm,
realize how valuable it is when other men are vulnerable, how helpful that is to us. So yeah, it takes it. If you said what did it take, I would say time.
mm. Yeah. I love that you just shared that around, somebody who seems so all put together,
Yeah.
and that they still struggle with something. Because, in today's culture, when you're looking at people, like especially on social media, where everybody seems like they've got the perfect life, and like
Oh
you
yeah.
think, everybody's like nobody's struggling with anything, to be able to see somebody who seems like they're so put together does still have challenges because we all do have challenges. Like there's
Yes.
nobody, I don't think anybody that exists on the planet that doesn't have challenges.
Exactly. Exactly.
So yeah, just to, sort of, I guess, acknowledge and just it's validating to know that, people that you might look up to because it seems like they're so put together that they, everybody's got challenges. So I just
Right.
love that you shared that.
Yeah, and I think that part of what holds people back is uh they don't actually face the challenges of life. And so they don't build those muscles
Mm,
of resilience or grit. And so they'll avoid and procrastinate,
mm,
and then the problems just get worse over time. Uh and I think that for one, I think there's something culturally that's happening that doesn't support people in terms of facing their challenges. There's too many
mm,
distractions, too many easy
mm.
ways for us to numb ourselves out.
Yeah.
Capitalism works on giving us all of the best things we can pay for to numb us out, whether it's doom scrolling or going to the local dispensary for weed or whatever it is. And I think it's really made it very difficult for people to sort of forge a strong ethical, moral character.
Yeah, it is. There are those of us that are doing this work and helping others sort of get there, right? So that's the piece. And,
Yes,
it's like one person at a time.
exactly, exactly. And that's our mission, isn't it? Right.
Absolutely. All right. It's been great chatting with you so far. I do want to start to wrap up today.
Yeah.
But before we end, I just wanted to sort of open up to any maybe final words of wisdom that you'd like to share with the audience today. Any final words?
Final words of wisdom. Yeah. I think that the here's a little exercise that I encourage everybody to do. I do this every day, and I don't ask people to do things that I'm not willing to do myself. So when I get up in the morning, the first thing that I do is, and you're supposed to put this in the second person, you are amazing because, talking about yourself, and fill it in. You're amazing
Mm,
because it doesn't even matter what it is. You brushed your teeth yesterday. I'm appreciative of. Talking about that, Patty Smith said, I appreciate my toothbrush. You got to find something you appreciate, right? I appreciate my legs. I appreciate I'm looking out at beautiful woods right now. And the third part is a vision. What's your vision for the day, the week, the month, the year? The more that we can see it, the more likely we are to bring that into reality. So we have so many negative internalized voices, the undermining gremlin, the voices of doubt, the
mm,
self-loathing, the shame, those happen automatically. So in order to counter that, you have to have a conscious exercise. And I think this is a great way to start the day. And I have group members who every day they post on our community platform why they're amazing, what they appreciate, and what their vision is. And I think it really helps to heal some of those core wounds, and
mm.
it's an inspiring way to start the day. And I think it makes it more likely that you're gonna bring those good things into manifestation.
Yeah, I love that. Absolutely. Just a positive message at the beginning of the day that can carry you for that day.
Yeah,
Because you're right, there's so much negative self-talk, so much negative chatter. To be able to bring in intentionally a positive message for yourself at the beginning of the day, I love that. So thank you so much for sharing that.
certainly.
All right. Well, thank you so much again for being with me today, Glenn. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
It's been great to speak with you as well, and I'd love to do it again sometime.
Awesome. Absolutely. Thank you.
I invite you to subscribe to the Embrace Balance Discover Joy podcast and join our community. If you feel inspired by what you hear, please leave a review and share this podcast with others who might benefit. And remember, it's never too late to embrace balance and discover joy in your life. Stay tuned for our upcoming episodes filled with inspiring stories and valuable insights. Until next time, take care and be kind to yourself.